So today I'm going to be doing my 2017 reading wrap-up, and so I read a total of 28 books this year, and I'm okay with that, but also my goal was 100, but I mean, what are you going to do when you're busy and you can't do a lot? So I'm okay with it. So what I'm going to do is just go through all the books that I read in the past year and tell you my ratings for them. Even though I kind of did that each month, I'm going to wrap it up all as a whole. So the first book that I read is part of the trilogy. It's the last book in a trilogy, and I didn't really know how I felt by the end of this trilogy. I know everybody loved the series, this trilogy, but I really just didn't enjoy it as much as a lot of people would. It could be because I felt like with me constantly starting and stopping the series because I had no time, I just didn't get a chance to fully immerse myself in the world. So this book is Champion by Marie Lu, and I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I mean, it was a good ending. When I got to this book, I just didn't remember what came after or what came before this for me to think that this was good-ish. You know what I mean? I think you know what I mean. The next 4 books I read in anticipation for A Series of Unfortunate Events Netflix TV show. So you can probably tell where I'm going with this. So I read The Bad Beginning, Bella, You Scared Me, The Reptile Room, The Wide Window, and The Miserable Mill, and these are all by Lemony Snicket. I gave, I think, each of these 5 stars just because I read these before when I was a child and I loved them, and they brought back my memory of reading this series and understanding why they decided to make it a TV show. I did end up liking the TV show. It was very good. It followed the books to a T, and I loved that. And I think Neil Patrick Harris was a perfect Count Olaf, and I think the actors that they chose for the Baudelaire children were very good. And did you know that the girl who plays Violet Baudelaire, I forget what her name is, she played briefly in Supergirl Young Kara when she was going off from Krypton, and I'm just like, that's where I know you from. The next book I read was, I think, for me to continue on with this series, because I did read the first book by this author the year before for the Let's Be Mermaids Readathon, and you can probably tell what it is, but that is Rogue Wave by Jennifer Donnelly. This is the second book in the Waterfire Saga series, and I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars because it's just, the series is so unique. It's not like the normal, the girl is a mermaid and she falls in love with a human and she wants to be with him. It's more of mermaid against mermaid, and they're trying to find these special talismans, I guess you could say, and each girl has to hold these talismans, and they are the reincarnations of these legendary mer figures, I guess you could say, and it's really good. And so this one I think focused mainly on Neela, which is Seraphina's best friend. The next book I did read before too, but I didn't own a physical copy because I had borrowed it from my high school's library, and I loved it, and I forgot how much I loved it, and I was kind of going on a contemporary binge, I guess you could say, because I have 2 consecutive books that are contemporary books at this point. And so I loved this book, and it's a series. I just haven't read the rest of it because I haven't gotten to anything. So that is Geek Karela, and that's by Piper Banks. I almost said Anna Banks, but it's Piper Banks. And this is basically about Miranda, who is a nerd at school, and she basically has, her dad got remarried, and she has to deal with her stepmother and her stepsister. Her stepsister goes to the school, and Miranda ends up meeting her one friend, and they end up realizing that they like each other, and that's pretty much what I remember because But I ended up giving this 5 stars just because nostalgia reasons, and also because I was craving a contemporary, so I was like, why not get this? And plus I got this from a book sale, I want to say, and it was like really cheap. So the next book that I read was also another contemporary, and this one I did read before too, and I was just doing rereads of my contemporaries at this point because I love contemporaries. So this one is Lock and Key by Sarah Dessen, and this basically follows Ruby, and she doesn't know where her mom's gone, but she ends up like meeting this guy and letting him in because she doesn't know where her mom is, and it's kind of like a cute thing, and I gave this a 4 stars. I think I would have given it like a 4.5. It's just Goodreads doesn't do 4.5s. I read this again, I think, and I enjoyed it, but I don't know if I enjoyed it as much as I did the first time. The next book that I read was a retelling by Marissa Meyer, and it's one of the new books that came out, I want to say this year-ish, and that is Heartless. And I loved Heartless. Like, I absolutely loved it. I was dying when I finished this. And so basically, it's a retelling of Alice in Wonderland through the Red Queen's eyes, or the Queen of Hearts' eyes, and before she became the Queen of Hearts. And I'm in love with this book still. Like, it's beautiful, and it's just wonderful, honestly. I love Marissa Meyer and her retelling. She makes them so special, and I think she definitely did do this one its justice because it's just so wonderful. I'm saying wonderful and beautiful over and over again, but it's so nice, and I think I enjoyed this as, like, I wish it would, like, continue on as a series, but I know it's a standalone because it ends as a standalone. Next book, I did read a contemporary, and I didn't read a lot of contemporaries this year, but I decided to pick up By Your Side by Casey West, and basically it's my kind of book because this girl gets stuck in a library overnight, and so there's this dude, and she tracks him down, and I don't know, it's like a really cute, like, bookish contemporary. I would recommend you guys read this because I gave it a 5 stars, and it's beautiful, it's cute, and I think it's what I needed when I first read it, because I was like, I need this. I need romance in my life because I don't have any. Next book is a sequel to a well-renowned book. It's called Illuminate, and I did finish Gemina by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. I read this book, and I have to say it wasn't as good as Illuminate. Like, I liked Gemina. Granted, I gave it a 5 stars just because it's a really cool series. Like, it's like told in like files and texts and messages and stuff, but it was more of like, this one was a little bit more confusing. You had to put a little bit more work into understanding it, but I did give it a 5 stars, and basically it's the sequel to Illuminate, which is like a space galaxy war thing, and it was really cool, and I enjoyed it, and I can't wait for I don't remember what the 3rd book's called, but I can't wait for that one to come out next year because that's going to be heckin' cool. Okay, the next 2 books, I'm going to admit I read these 2 in anticipation, one for the other. So, first book I reread was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and I reread this, and I think I reread this in anticipation for A Court of Wings and Ruin, and this was my most anticipated book of the year, I would say, because this is the last book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses trilogy, but she is doing different novels or novellas for different characters, and that's going to be coming out next year, and I really did like this. I loved it. If you saw my little vlog last summer, or this past summer, of me getting it and how the page was kind of ruined, I loved this book. I think it wrapped it up perfectly. I laughed, I cried, I went on an emotional journey, and I absolutely loved it. And I gave them both 5 stars. The next book I read was The Trials of Apollo, The Dark Prophecy by Rick Riordan, and this is in the Trials of Apollo series, and this follows Apollo, the god, and he basically comes down to Earth and is human. And I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars because it was funny and it was cute, and I enjoyed it. I would say that out of all the series that I've read by Rick Riordan, I think the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series is still my favorite. I also do like the Magnus Chase series, which I'll get to in a second. That's my second favorite. But I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars just because it's Rick Riordan and I can understand his writing, and it's really cute and I like it because it's meant for like kids, but I'm like 20 years old and yet here I am reading a kid's book. The next book is the third book in a quartet, and it's by Maggie Stiefvater, and that is Blue Lily, Lily Blue, and I had to reread this series like a few times. I had to reread The Raven Boys a few times because at first I didn't enjoy it, and then the second time around I was like, interesting. I didn't pick up on things that I did before. And then I started picking up the rest of the books in the series, and I actually enjoyed these, as you can see by me ripping apart my spine. This is the third book, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Like, this is like a, not like a 5-star series to me, it's more like a 4, 4.5. But I still thought it was good, and I enjoyed it to an extent, and it felt good to, when I finally finished this, it felt good to finish it, because I was like, I had been reading this for a while. I got in this slump for a while, and I just needed to finish it, if you know what I mean. The next book that I read is a contemporary, and it's by a Wattpad author. Surprise, surprise. Because I try to support as many Wattpad authors as I can, especially this one that I do read a lot from, and her name is Ali Novak, and she wrote Paper Hearts, and this is in the Heartbreaker series, and so this follows a girl named Felicity who has basically is trying to find her sister, and she runs away. Well, she doesn't run away, but she leaves home, goes to find a sister, and along the way she meets Alec at this like masquerade ball, and he's part of this band called the Heartbreakers, and so he ends up going with her on this journey with her two best friends, and they end up trying to find her sister. And this was I was waiting for this book to come for a while, and I actually have a bookmark signed by her, I think. Or a bookmark. I don't remember where it is. It's somewhere. But I really enjoyed this, and this was like the perfect summer read for me, and I absolutely needed it in my life, and it was really good. And she might be coming out with another one. The world may never know. But I'm excited for this series because it's really good, and I read it on Wattpad first, and Wattpad is like a really good place to read, so Wattpad, sponsor me. This next book is by Victoria Aveyard, and it's called King's Cage, and I loved King's Cage. I think I liked this more than Glass Sword, because Glass Sword was very like slow moving, and like I didn't like it, as you could tell from my review. But I really did like this. I'm saying with all these books that I really did like them. This is a 4 out of 5 star. Still some points where it was kind of slow and predictable, but I enjoyed it, and I can't wait to meet her at BookCon if I'm going to BookCon. I'll update you guys on that soon. But this is the third book in the Red Queen series, and she's coming out with one more book next year, and I'm very scared to see what our characters go through, because I have some precious sons and characters in this book series. Okay. The next book I don't have a physical copy of, because this was the one audiobook that I listened to this year, and that was First Life by Gina Showalter, and I loved this book so much. I loved it. It made me so happy, and I know there were some reviews where people didn't like it, but I liked it. And so basically it's about when you die, you have a choice of where you go. Myriad or something like that. Myriad and something to the other. I don't remember what the other one's called. But it's about Tenley Lockwood, and she has to choose where she goes because she is one of the only people who hasn't chosen yet. And people are trying to like persuade her over to their side, and this whole war is like ensuing over her, basically on both sides, in like heaven or hell or whatever you want to call them. And it was so good. I absolutely love Killian just because he has my last name, and it's Killian Jones, my son, from Once Upon a Time. And I gave this a 5 stars, and I can't wait to read Lifeblood. That's gonna be like my favorite ever. The next book that I read this year was for the Let's Be Mermaids readathon, and that was Daughters of the Sea, Hannah, and I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. This is a children's book, I want to say, or like a middle grade. The reason I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars was because it was just like, I don't know, it felt a little young for me, and like I tried, I really did, and like I knew this was going to be a younger kid book, but it was just more of like me thinking that it was going to be a little older than that. But regardless, it was good. And the next book that I read was Forsaken, and this was by Kristen Day, and I think this was our book of the special book for our readathon, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. It was really good. I don't remember a lot about it because this was over the summer, but I enjoyed it, and I gave it a 5 stars. The next book that I read was Tangled Tides, and this was the first book in the Sea Monster Memoirs series, I guess. And so basically this girl is like a sea monster, basically, but she doesn't know it. It's kind of like the classic, like, you don't know you are a mythical character until someone from the mythical world tells you what you are. And I didn't like this as much as I thought I would. It was weird. This is why this is one of the only books that I probably gave a 3 out of 5 stars, because I just didn't really enjoy it as much as I thought I would. The next book, novella that I read was The Little Android from Marissa Meyer, and I have read this before, but I was using this for a readathon, my readathon, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars because I loved it. I love Little Mermaid retellings. Like, it's my life because The Little Mermaid's my life, and that's all I have to say. The next book is a series that I mentioned before in this wrap-up, and that is the Waterfire Saga, and I read The Dark Tide by Jennifer Donnelly, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars just because I was, again, in a reading funk, and I couldn't get through it as much as I wanted to. But I really do love this series. I'm trying to read Sea Spell right now. I haven't started it yet because I've been busy. But this follows, what's her face? Follows Ling, basically, from her travels throughout the sea, and like it's very, very diverse. So yeah, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, but I would think it was 4.5 than a 4.5. 4. The next book is a book that I read for the Mermaids readathon, and I read this series because of Serena, and it's basically her like namesake series. And so I continued reading. This is the second book of Triton out of the Serena Legacy series, and I gave this, I remember it's really short, honestly, but like it was really good, and so I gave it a 5 stars. I remember giving it 5 stars, but Goodreads doesn't remember that shit anymore. But this is continuing off of Poseidon, and I would recommend you read that before I read this. It was really good, and I can't wait to continue on with the next book of Neptune. Oh my god, I can't function. The next book, everybody and their mothers were raving about this book, and this series actually, and I did read the first book, Six of Crows, last year, and I loved it. And so then I read Cricket Kingdom, and oh my god, I was crying. I was crying by the end of this book, guys. Even though I did give it 4 stars on Goodreads, it's a 4.5 by far, and it was so good, and I loved it. There's some characters who I wished would have survived, but I'm not gonna spoil anything. But anyway, I gave this 4 stars, but it's more of a 4.5 by far. The third to last book that I read was a contemporary, and it was a book that came out this year, and I ordered it, and I was like, I need to read this book because I love retellings, and it's a contemporary, and it's called Geek Karela. And it's basically about this girl who is conversing with this guy online on this chat room about their favorite show, Starfield, and there's a convention, and her sisters basically ban her from going because it's evil stepsisters, and it's so good. It got me out of my reading slump. I was like so like in a reading slump when I read this, and then when I read it and finished it, I was like screaming because it was so good. Yeah, you have to read it. It's so good. And I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Like, I was so excited to read this. The next book was another anticipated book of this year, and it took me a while to read it because school was being annoying. And Power of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas, and I wasn't expecting it to take the turn that it did, but I was like screaming towards the end of this book because certain ships get together that I absolutely loved. But I think the reason why it took a while, because I forgot what happened to Kale throughout the Thorn Glass series, so I didn't understand, but I gave it a 4 stars, like a good 4 stars. 4 stars, just because, like, yeah. But this follows Kale and his journey, and basically it's so good. Guys, just read it. I love it. And the last book is one that I just finished, and I loved it. I was dying. And that is Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard, The Hammer of Thor by Rick Riordan. And this is the second book in the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series. And I loved it just because Loki made an appearance in this series, this book, and I'm just like, Loki's my favorite Norse god. I don't know why. Just because. You know, if you've seen my Infinity War trailer, then you probably know. But, so this follows the events of the last book and trying to prevent Ragnarok. And I gave this a 4.5 stars. And I loved it so much. So that was my 2017 reading wrap up, guys. My name is Olivia, you're on Bookish Perkins 9's channel, and I hope to see you soon with another video. Bye.